to life.
He still takes the field? Yep. Love it. Get a good deep breath. Get ready to roll here. Only about one thing tonight, getting the W's, so gotta be around the end to do that. Get ready to roll tonight, boys. Let's go out this fun.
Don't get me any more fired up than I already am.
All the way to the checkered. You are fine. Nobody's got to run. Checker time, baby! Really proud of you, man. You drove your butt off tonight. We had the best start here, bud. Yeah, boys. Way to rebound. Great job. Great job, bud. Really good job. Appreciate you hanging in there with us all weekend. What a weekend. Good job. Thank you.
And welcome back to Racing in the Draft. My name is Mark. Thanks for joining on a late edition for Saturday night after the exciting Xfinity race where Eric Almirola ends up getting the win there at the end over Connor Zilic. Finally, somebody beat that kid. No, just kidding. I enjoy watching Connor win, but it was a great little battle between Eric Almirola, Connor Zilic, and coming in third place was Allgaier. So the 19 team is into the final four with 3 spots for the owners' places to get in. But I'm not sure exactly what was said between Jesse Love and Sanchez there at the end. But I know Sanchez ruffled a couple feathers coming up to the field. But quite an interesting race. Not a whole lot of cautions, not a whole lot of carnage. It'll be interesting to see what tomorrow brings for the Cup race, as typically we see a lot of issues with the fall race at Las Vegas. But either way, before we do that, let's go back 1 week to the Roval, where, no surprise to anyone, Shane Van Gisbergen does what SVG does on road courses and just absolutely dominates the field once again. As expected, he was hands down, as we saw last week in the practice speeds, the fastest of everyone, and he proved that again on Sunday. But it was quite interesting to see Larson and Bell kind of play with them at the end, or kind of towards the end, to kind of make a statement of, hey, we're still around. We can still drive this car around a road course. Not quite as good as you, but we'll make it a little bit difficult. Andrew, what's going on, buddy? I fell hard at the end and can't figure out how. Maybe Hemrick? I'm not 100% sure. My lineups for Xfinity just did not pan out well at all. But I don't put near as much time into that as I do the Cup Series. And with it's really difficult when everything gets sandwiched to within like a 5-hour window to Xfinity practice and qualifying, setting those lineups to Cup practice and qualifying, to the Xfinity race, and then getting all the practice speeds and everything put in. I'm not 100% sure where I happened to slip a little bit. I still got some of my money back, but not near what I do. I did not have a whole lot of Allgaier. I had, who did I have a lot of? Let me see if I can find it real quick. I had a bunch of Trevor Bayne. But Bain started 26. I know he finished probably top 20, which still wasn't enough as far as I know. I don't really know where Trevor Bain ended up finishing because it was such a fun race to watch there up towards the front. There's also football going on. It's just all sorts of stuff. It's just a crazy time of year. But either way, it was exciting. There's always tomorrow. You felt like Allgaier was due? Yeah. I listened to Allgaier's radio, their pit communication and crew chief communication, and they just missed just by a little bit. I mean, they finished in third. Still a good race. They led some laps at the beginning. But, I mean, I had a feeling that Zilic was going to be better than Allgaier. I had more Allgaier. I just thought Trevor Bayne would actually do a little bit better in the Sam Hunt car, because Sam Hunt usually brings pretty good cars, and Trevor Bayne. The problem with Trevor is he just doesn't race enough to really probably do what I wanted him to do. I was kind of going off of, hey, there's a lot of place differential here. I know that more than likely Zilich, Allgaier, Almirola, or maybe even Brandon Jones, who did really well at Kansas, would end up doing pretty well. But either way, it was still an exciting race. It was still a lot of fun to watch, and honestly, that's as much of why I watch the racing as I do for the DraftKings gambling side of things. So it still turned out 50% good for me, but there's always tomorrow, and that's really where I spend a lot more time and energy and thought process into building lineups is for tomorrow's race. But back to the optimal lineup from the Roval, we had SVG Ryan Preece with actually a really good finish. That was actually not completely surprising. I did have that as a place differential call. I just didn't think he would get all the way up to a sixth place finish. I thought he would finish, 10th, 11th, 12th, somewhere in there. But good for him. Kyle Larson, Kyle Larson slowly has been week in and week out just improving slightly each week and getting back into full form shape. Tomorrow, I think, will be a real test to find out if he and that team have what it's going to take to possibly win a championship. And it's just going to be extremely tough at Phoenix pretty much we're guaranteed to have at least, I would think, one of the Penske drivers and at least one of Christopher Bell. And I think if one of those three show up, that's probably going to be who your favorite is. But that's why they go race. Who knows what's going to happen? But if either one of the Penske drivers gets in, they're definitely going to be the favorite to win. But yeah, it was kind of crazy. I think Denny Hamlin last week had to be careful about what he said and how he said it, even on his podcast and after the race, on who he wanted to race. I absolutely think he would have much rather raced Ross Chastain straight up than potentially have Joey Logano get into the round of 8. Now, Joey Logano's got a much bigger hill to climb, and I honestly don't think that either Joey or Ross make it to the Final Four. But if by chance Ross made it to the Final Four, I think Denny would much rather race Ross than race Joey Logano. And I think if Denny had known the situation, number one, he would have been prepared to get spun in the final corner. He also probably would have never passed Ross to begin with. Just my honest opinion. But in all honesty, I'm kind of glad that Denny didn't know, because that shouldn't be how they race. They shouldn't be racing for what's going to potentially happen in 3 or 4 weeks. It should be, let's race it straight up. For this race, best position gets it. But I don't know if you can ever fix that, because everybody's going to begin to, if they don't get told by their pit crews or crew chief where people are running and how they're running, they're just going to memorize that, hey, I know that these guys are on the cut line to get in. I know I'm safe, or whatever. So I don't think there's any way to ever change it, other than, we go to the full year racing. And honestly, I am not one of the ones that wants to go back to a full season points. I want some type of hybrid. I like the take maybe the top 16 or whatever. We do 3 weeks or 3 races, 3 races, and then a 4 race where we have a mile and a half. We have a short track, maybe an intermediate, and I'm not even sure I want a road course, but so maybe 2.5 miles or 2 intermediate style tracks, something along those lines to kind of mix it up. And you take, the top 6 or 8 drivers, and those 6 or 8 drivers battle it out in those last 4 races. That's kind of more of what I think would be interesting, because I think by the time you get down to the final race, it's going to be between 3 or 4 drivers anyways. You're just going to have a couple drivers that will have issues and separate themselves out anyways. So I don't know. I don't really want to go back to the days where we have a full 36 point race. I just think at the end, once every 4 years, you'll have a close points battle between 3 guys, but most of the time it's typically decided a week or 2 before you ever get to the final. And I just don't particularly want that, because then it becomes really hard to set up lineups when it comes to Draftkings. Either way, optimal lineups, you had a chance to look at this, the optimal lineup challenge. Chase Elliott now up by 2 still over Denny Hamlin and Kyle Larson. Ryan Blaney in the 4th position, 3 points out, and probably not able to get it. So I think it's down to the final 3 for the optimal lineup challenge, with Chase Elliott, Denny Hamlin, and Kyle Larson. Yeah, Andrew agrees. Phoenix, too big of an advantage for Bell or Blaney or Joey Logano. Now, we've seen other drivers win there. I mean, we saw Ross Chastain win there 2 years ago, I think it was. But I like a 4-race shootout with 6 or 8 drivers is kind of how I think I would like it. But, and have a super speedway in there. Have it as maybe not the first race, because that might eliminate too many potential drivers. Have it as the second race of a 4-race session. Start with maybe a Kansas, then go to a Talladega, then maybe do a Phoenix, then Martinsville, and then like a Miami Homestead or something along those lines. It's kind of what I kind of have a thought process on, but I don't know. I don't make the rules. I just watch the racing and pick drivers I think are going to do well. All right. Either way, that was the Roval. I'm also done with the Roval. It's run its course. Let's go back to the 1.5 miles at Charlotte. And I'm fine even putting that as maybe the first race of the 4-race finals. Maybe we don't do a Vegas or a Kansas, or maybe you take that first race and you every year you go, Vegas gets it 1 year as the first race, Kansas gets it the next year, and then Charlotte gets it the next year, or something along those lines. I don't know. Just, they got to do something different than what they're doing. I think it's kind of gotten a little stale, and I'm fine with the winner gets in. I'm fine with a winner in the regular season gets in. Now, I would be also okay with, you have to be, by the time the playoffs start, you have to be in the top 25 in points for your win to count for you to advance in. Maybe not even 25, maybe at least the top 30. I don't know, 25 or 30. I think it's more 25. I think top 20, you got to be in the top 25 in points to have a win to count to get into the playoffs. Because, I mean, if you're 28th, what are you doing making the playoffs? So you went and won Daytona or Talladega. I mean, no offense to Harrison Burton, but we also saw that didn't turn out very well for him. All right, either way, let's get to Las Vegas this week. The first round of 8 drivers to make it to the final 4. And it's a intermediate D-shaped track. It's 1.5 miles in length, 18 to 20 degrees of progressive bankings in both turns 1 and 2, and 3 and 4. Race length is 267 laps, just like 2 weeks ago when we were at Kansas. 187 points for Dominator points. We will need to probably look at least 1, if not 2, potential Dominators or really good finishers, like top 3 type finishers. Kind of like what we saw at Kansas. Now, this track will run slightly different than Kansas. The speeds are about 4 miles an hour faster here at Vegas than they were at Kansas. Kansas is a much more top line dominant track, where Vegas has a little bit more tire wear, but you can run bottom line, middle line, and top line more so than you can at Kansas. So it's still an aero blocking track. It's still going to perform and run very similar to Kansas. The points are very similar to Kansas. So no real difference there. I think 1 to 2 dominators / finishers, 2 to 3 place differentials, and then 1 driver or 2 drivers that kind of start in, between 8th and 15th and kind of finish 8th to 15th. It's probably going to be kind of how this thing lines up. Other tracks to compare to, of course, we just talked about Kansas. You can also look at Charlotte. Miami's a little bit different, and Texas has 2 different turns, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, which make it a little bit of an oddball. But Kansas, Charlotte, and Vegas, all 3 mile-and-a-half, kind of tri-oval D-shaped style tracks with similar type tire wear, similar banking, and those types of things. So our previous lineups, our optimal lineups from the last 4 Las Vegas races. So the spring of 2025. So earlier this year, all 6 of the drivers finished in the top 10. And the furthest starting back was Daniel Suarez, starting in 23rd. We had no real true dominator. Kyle Larson did lead 61 of the 267 laps, but I always look at 30% of laps led as kind of a dominator. So not quite there, but still having a pretty good performance for Kyle Larson. Started in 10th, finished in 9th, getting 69.25 points. But as always, we always want to look at the higher priced drivers, and what was the lowest high priced driver who made the optimal is 55, so 54.6, call it 55 points for William Byron. And this will come in handy when we're trying to build lineups and trying to figure out who potentially of our high-end drivers we want to look at and what type of point value they need to get for Draftkings to potentially be in the optimal. For the last, 12, 14, 16 weeks, I've been really kind of hitting on this. It's really kind of come true. Now, you just got to find that right driver. It's been the biggest issue. In the fall race, so the race 1 year ago, Christopher Bell led 155 laps. He did not finish in first. That was a Joey Logano. It ended up being a fuel mileage race 1 year ago. Hopefully we don't see that again. I don't like fuel mileage races because Joey Logano tends to win those. I am not a Joey fan. That would just be blunt and honest. But Christopher Bell leading 155 laps, finishing second, scored 112 points. William Byron, again, having 54.25 points, so 54 to 55 points at 10,800. He only led 1 lap. He started in 9th, finished in 4th. This is kind of what I'm talking about. Somebody who kind of starts up front, stays up front. Not really a dominator, but just a good finish. But 5 of the 6 drivers finished in the top 10, and Corey LaJoie with a huge place differential from 35th to 14th. All right, and then our spring 24 race, once again, Kyle Larson completely dominated this race at 181 laps led, 110 points scored. But Ross Chastain at $9,100 had a point total of 62.35. And then the Vegas 23 fall race, Christopher Bell at 73.8, Kyle Larson 109 for 73 points is kind of the mark. So I'm going to really kind of call it at about 60 points. So it's kind of between the 73, 62, 54, and 54. We'll kind of average it out and we'll call it a 60 for a point total to probably for a high-priced driver to get close to the optimal. It changes and it kind of descends downwards as the price comes down. Just how the structure works. Daniel Hemrick only needing 40 points at $5,500 makes the optimal. And that's kind of what I'm saying, is the value changes as the point total goes down. All right, so then what the next thing I want to look at is the top 15 drivers, where they start the race, and their 15 point, what their point total is. What's the minimum point total for the top 15 drivers, and where they end up starting. And starting in the top 5, it's 2 drivers. 6 through 10 is 3.4. So the top 10 drivers encompass 5.4 of the top 15 drivers. Then 11 through 20 is 3.8. 21 through 30 starting spots is 3.4. And then 31st or worse is 2.4. So what this kind of gives us a gauge on is how much value or credit we need to give somebody who's starting in the top 5, and can they make the top 15 in Draftkings points? Well, about half of them do, on average. So it's about 5.4, and then kind of the 11 through 20 starting spots have about 3.8, and then 3.4, 21 to 30, and then 2 drivers or so from 31st or worse starting spot. And then our dominators, we typically have on average between 1 and 2 dominators, either between laps led or fast laps. And then a total of place differentials, we average about 6 place differentials across the field. Not all 6 of those make the optimal lineup, but they probably encompass most of the top 15 in point totals. But our 15 point total average is 31.83. So with that being said, all that kind of coming around, because it pretty much, if you go back and look week after week, this total, which I'm going to call it 32, we're just going to round up, realistically is almost always very consistent, track type to track type, and lap counts, because if you have 500 laps at Bristol or Martinsville, it changes this total. It'll actually make this total a little bit higher. It'll make it 36, 37, 38 points to make it in the top 15, whereas at Talladega, those won't be, because there's just not as many points that are out there. But on average, for Las Vegas, for the last 4 races, it's about 32 points to be in the top 15. And the reason I focus on this is I end up having a core top 15 drivers that I build lineups around. Below that, I probably have another 5 to 7 drivers, which are, I would consider, my sub-core. So that takes me to about half of the field. So I can eliminate, on average, around 15 to 17 drivers, depending on how many drivers start, before I even start building lineups. And that's why it's important, because what you're trying to do is eliminate drivers that, number one, are either starting too far up, or like a Cody Ware, who rarely ever makes the top 15 in points or optimal lineups, and you can just pull them out of your lineup, and you don't have to worry about building lineups around them. And if you're doing a medium to large field, 20 plus lineups, that helps, because you can start to eliminate half of the field or half the drivers from the lineups that you're building. Hopefully that makes sense. So that's why I look at these points and these totals and try to figure out, who do I eliminate, who do I keep, and it gets even more difficult. Like this week, we had nobody mess up in practice. We had nobody having to drop to the rear before qualifying. So we don't have a whole lot of cars that are starting in the back that have a ton of potential place differential movement upwards. Like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago at Kansas, we had Ryan Blaney, who had the issue and had to go to a backup car. Well, he was starting last, or next to last. That was an easy shoe-in for a place differential. So it was like plug and play. That's a free square. Now we're looking at building 5 for 5 drivers. And that ended up being the case for Kansas a couple weeks ago. This week, we don't have that. So we have to find the 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 drivers that potentially have the best chance of moving up through the field. And there are a couple out there. But then I also have built this ranking system, which takes into account the last 5 races at this track, the last 10 races at similar style tracks, the last 5 races on normal ovals, so that excludes any road courses or super speedways, and look at the trend line for that. I look at practice, then I look at qualifying, which gives me place differential, and that gives me a ranking system. So starting in the top 5, William Byron is probably the top driver starting in the top 5. Right behind him is Christopher Bell and Denny Hamlin. So those 3 drivers will probably be who I will key in on for potential dominators and or slash finishing kind of where they start. And if they start in the top 5, finish in the top 5, typically they're going to have some fast laps. They're potentially going to lead some laps. But those 5 drivers I will definitely key in on. Chase Elliott and Chase Briscoe, maybe not so much, but they still may not be excluded. We'll put them on the... I have a calculator that we can plug in and look at what they would need to do to make the top 15 in points. Kyle Larson is my number 1 rank. And if we go back and look at the last couple of optimal lineups, he's in this one from the spring race this year. He missed the fall of 24, but he made the spring of 24 and the fall of 23. So 3 out of the 4 last optimals, he was in it. That's why he also probably showed up number 1 on my ranking system. He also was decent in practice. He's got a little bit of place differential, only 5 spots starting in 6 if he goes and finishes in first. But he also has a tendency to lead some laps here. He's very good at the mile-and-a-half styles. And then Joe Logano, Tyler Reddick are both in there. Bubba Wallace and Ty Gibbs are not in my top 20. But honestly, I think looking at the past history of Vegas and Kansas and those types, I think Bubba Wallace, I think my algorithm, for some reason, does not bring Bubba Wallace up as far as he probably should be. And I don't go and adjust it. I just let the numbers run, and then I make some kind of adjustments on some gut feelings. So just based on the numbers, Bubba Wallace is ranked 20th, but I think Bubba Wallace actually ends up probably a little bit higher than that. But then 11 through 20, Ross Chastain, Brian Blaney, Alex Bowman, Chris Buescher, Daniel Suarez are all kind of in my top 15 in rankings. Then 21 through 30, it's Josh Berry, John Hunter Nemechek, Carson Hocevar are kind of in those top spots. And then 31st or worse, it's pretty much Brad Keselowski, Kyle Busch, Austin Cindric would be the 3 drivers I would look at there. So this kind of gives me a real indication of, okay, William Byron, Christopher Bell, Denny Hamlin, Larson, Logano, Reddick, Chastain, Blaney, Bowman, Buescher, Suarez. I don't think I like Berry, even though he shows up 13th on my list. Nemechek could be potentially there. Hocevar is potentially there. Chaos. Honestly, I really like Noah Gragson this week, even though he's not showing up real good on my algorithmic sheet. But I think there's a little something here with Noah Gragson, just as that's just a gut check reaction. He's also from Las Vegas. He runs this race really well, typically. So just a gut check. I think Noah Gragson could be in store for a decent race. All right, so let's get to the driver-by-driver breakdown. We are starting with the most expensive driver here at Kyle Larson, $11,500. No wonder he showed up first on my sheet. But so his price tag is $11,500. He is starting in the 6th position. His practice speeds, he was 9th in single lap. So single lap fastest lap time. Kyle Larson was 9th fastest of the group. He did 29 total laps at practice. And his 10-lap consecutive average, so 10 laps without making a pit stop, he was 27th of the 38 drivers starting this week. There's 2 drivers I'm not even going to worry about even talking about. So in the last 5 races at Kansas is this line here. So in the last 5 races from there, 2 wins for Kyle Larson, 3 top 5s, 4 top 10s, 5 top 20s, an 82.0 Draftkings average. He has an average finish of 4.8 and an average running position throughout the race of 5.9. He finished ninth in this race in the spring of 2025. His total full race history at Las Vegas with 18 total starts. He has 3 wins, 8 top 5s, 13 top 10s, 16 of 18 starts he's finished in the top 20 for a 9.4 average finish. Kyle Larson is extremely good at Vegas. He's extremely good at mile and a halfs. No surprise there, really. Then down here, we have our championship battle. And Kyle Larson currently is plus 4 points to the cut line. So he has got 4 points. It's not a whole lot. This is the closest points battle that I can ever remember going into the start of this final round of 8 drivers. I think Denny I can't remember who it is. I think they're at plus 6 or plus 8. I think it's the highest. And I think Joey Logano is like minus 12 or something. It's crazy how tight the group is to start this round. Kyle Larson does have 3 wins on the season. And then we get into his actual practice speeds and what they compare to. William Byron is the control car for this week. And there is something kind of significant for about the past, 4 or 5 weeks. The control car has gone on to be the winner of the race or the highest Draftkings points total. So not sure how much that actually will follow suit, but William Byron is the control car this week. He was fastest in long run speed, and he was second fastest in short run speed. So just kind of keep that in mind. Something I thought I'd throw out there. But Kyle Larson, so the white line is the averages of all the drivers in each lap. And William Byron, of course, is this black line. And then Kyle Larson, of course, is this yellow line. And each of these segments is a half a second. So we start at 29.5, which nobody gets close to. Most everybody's starting at about 30 seconds. And we fall off all the way to about by lap 30. We are falling off to 31.5. So a 1.5 second fall off from the start of a run to a 30 lap run. And they actually can honestly go about 40 to 45 laps on a fuel mileage type situation. You might even be able to extend to 50 laps. The Brewers just beat the Cubs and have advanced to the semifinals. So, if anybody's paying attention to baseball, I just happen to have it up. So, good on the Brewers. They probably deserve to win. Sorry, Cubbies. You'll have to wait till next year, or 108 years, or whatever it took you the last time to win one. My team got knocked out earlier this week, so I don't feel too bad for anybody else. But this is the practice sheet. Kyle Larson is much better than average, except for a couple laps towards the end. And he actually complained in the middle of practice that he was extremely tight. And they came in, they loosened him up. It probably didn't seem to help out a whole lot, but it's very hard to tell how much it helped or didn't help. He said he felt better towards the end. All right, so putting him on what we call the calculator. This line here is the same last 5 races at Kansas, where he's got his best finish is first, his worst finish is 11th. He has a 4.8 average, which we just talked about. And then the trend line is the last 5 oval, traditional style ovals, non-super speedway, non-road courses. He has a best of 6th and a worst of 32nd and a 15.2 for the trend line. So between those two, roughly about an average of a 10th. Not that that means a whole heck of a lot. I probably put more weight towards the actual track type than I do for the trend line. But the trend line is also something to be aware of when you're building lineups. If you have a driver who is trending on the bad side, you might want to stay away. If they're trending on the good side, you might want to take. So it's just always kind of good to know what the trend line is. And it is something that does come into play. All right, so if he is starting in 6th, and we think, so the optimal line, remember we talked about this earlier, the optimal line for an expensive driver is going to be at least 60 points or more. So how does Kyle Larson get to 60 points and potentially make the optimal lineup? Well, lead 40 laps, have 20 fast laps. And I've always kind of had the rule of thumb for most races. There are a couple exceptions, Talladega, Daytona, those types, where laps led don't always negate to fast laps. But on average, it's about a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 laps led to fast laps. So if Kyle Larson goes and leads 40 laps, has 20 fast laps, finishes in 3rd, well, he's at 63 points. That's enough to potentially make the optimal lineup, depending on how lineups end up falling. But what you're trying to do is find drivers who you think will continually either be in the optimal lineup or at least in the top 15, so you can either keep or disregard or put into the maybe I run or maybe I don't. So that would be what I consider the sub-core group, is the ones that I'm like, I really don't know if I like it or don't like it, but if it ends up fitting, maybe I do put them in. Kyle Larson is definitely one of the drivers I'll put in. He's extremely good here. 3 of the last 4, he's made the optimal lineup. So Kyle Larson's definitely in. And I don't think he's got to do a whole heck of a lot to kind of make a potential optimal lineup or be kind of on the heavier side of what we would need for the optimal or a good finishing position. I've also got some bets going on. I'm just checking my sheet. I've got Kansas plus 14, and they are currently 18 down. They need to score. Okay. Sorry. I have a couple things going on. So, Christopher Bell, next in line here at 10,200, starting in the 3rd position. He was 10th in single lap of practice. He did 38 total laps of practice, and he was 4th in the 10-lap consecutive average run. He does not have a win here, despite how good he has run at Vegas in the past, with the last 5 races being 3 top 5s, 4 top 20s, a 10.8 average finish, a 10.8 average running position. Still does not have a win here, but he is starting in the 3rd position. He is -4 to the cut line. Told you it's really, really close to this cut line as of right now. And if we look at his practice speeds, they are not far off from William Byron's speed. Between lap 20 and 27, he actually was slightly faster than William Byron. And this is all somewhat dependent on if they're trying to pass somebody, if they're searching for a different groove in the racetrack to kind of see if it's faster or slower when the tires start to wear down. There's all sorts of reasons why some of these speeds may fall off, but for the most part, all in all, his practice speeds were very, very good and very close to William Byron. What we're looking for is either somebody to be way better or way worse. And typically, because I've already picked the control car as the best of everyone, it's going to be who's going to have, and we've got some guys who have practice speeds in the 32 range, and that's maybe a potential that we want to stay away from. All right, so what does Christopher Bell need to potentially do to make the optimal? Because he's starting 3 spots better than Kyle Larson. Well, he's never won here before, so we'll say he starts in 3rd, finishes in 3rd. Well, if he leads 50 laps and has 25 fast laps, it's plenty. It's 64.75. Well, what happens if he only leads 25 laps and only has 12 fast laps? Well, that's 52.65. Now, it is enough to be in the top 15 in points, but it's not potentially going to be in the optimal range. So, Christopher Bell, this is where it becomes a gut check. Do you think Christopher Bell either has a lot more laps led, or potentially finishes better, or finishes worse, and doesn't have as many laps led? On whether you decide to put him into your lineups or not into your lineups. I will have some ownership of Christopher Bell. I probably come on, Kansas. Sorry. I needed Kansas to score, and they just threw an interception. Blah, blah, blah. That'll hurt my my chances of winning money on that. So, but if you think maybe he does win and has 25 and 12, well, it's still really, honestly, not enough probably for the optimal lineup. He would need to lead probably 40 laps. Yeah. That would give him 66 points. And that's why I kind of like this calculator. It's like, what does Christopher Bell need to do or have to do to get to that 60-point range or higher? And do I think it's possible? Well, based on history, he's never won here before. He's run the races pretty well, but just hasn't ever won. Well, if he does 40 laps led and has 20 fast laps, and he finishes where he starts, well, that's exactly at 60 points. Maybe kind of a little bit risky. So I'll probably be in the 20-25% ownership range on Control, depending on how things kind of fall. With Kyle Larson, I'll probably be in the 25 to 30, maybe 35% range, because he has made 3 of the last 4 optimal lineups and has a few more wins at Las Vegas. Denny Hamlin, $11,000, starting from the pole position. During practice, he was 4th in single lap, 6th in 10-lap consecutive average. He does not have a top 5 in the last 5 races here, but does have 3 top 10s, 4 top 20s with an average finish of 12.4. He finished 25th in the spring race here. He is plus 8 on the cut line. I think he actually has the highest points to the cut line. And if we look at his practice speeds, he fired off perfectly fine, but he definitely got a little bit wonky towards the end. In fact, I remember listening to some of the in-car communication during practice with Denny, and he was like, holy crap, my car got really, really loose. I can't drive it. I've got to come in and get an adjustment made. They'll make an adjustment for the race time, but he definitely, after about lap 17, he got really, really, really loose. And you can just see here from his practice speeds that did happen. So that's a little bit concerning when we're talking about who we want to put in, who we don't want to put in, and those types of things. And starting from the pole position, unless you think the person starting from the pole is going to, number one, win the race or finish or have about 50, 60 laps led, you probably don't want to put them in your lineups because there's no place to go but down if you don't finish in first. So we'll put down the calculator and we'll see what that actually looks like. So starting first, if you think Denny's going to go win and he's going to lead 70 laps and have 35 fast laps, well, that gets you 78.25 points. Okay, well, that's great. Well, if we think Christopher Bell or Chase Briscoe or Chase Briscoe or Denny Hamlin or William Byron are going to end up leading some of these laps or potentially more of these laps, and you think Denny falls to 5th and he leads. So I forgot to look. I meant to look every week what the how many laps are in stage 1? 80, then 85, and then 102. So 80 laps in the first stage. They will need to at least pit at least once. So because he's starting from the pole, that probably gives him a really good chance at leading some laps, at least to the first pit stop. Then maybe that's 40 laps. And he has 20 fast laps. And he finishes in 5th, it's 54 points. If he finishes in 3rd, it's 58 points. 2nd would put him at 60 points. And that's what I'm kind of saying, is even leading 40 laps, having 20 fast laps, he's going to have to finish at least second. Anything worse than that, he's outside the optimal. Now, he's still top 15 in points. He would have to fall all the way to 15th or worse for him not to be in the top 15 in points, which is very possible because his average is 12.4 at Las Vegas and the current trend line is 10.6. So, on average, probably not, but there definitely stands a chance where he finishes 11th. Well, that's only 41 points. At $11,000, I don't want an $11,000 driver. I don't want an $11,000 driver only having 41 points. It's going to drag down everything that I need. So I will have some of Denny Hamlin, but I will not be very heavy on Denny Hamlin. I will probably be in the 10 to 15% range on Denny Hamlin, just on the chance that he does well. The biggest part that concerns me is what he said in practice and these practice lap times. Really make me think that William Byron, who's starting in the top 5, probably even before they get to the first either caution or green flag pit stop, I have a feeling that William Byron will probably be able to get around Denny Hamlin. Ryan Blaney, 10,500. Not a real good starting spot. 14th is his starting spot. His practice speeds were 17th in single lap, 19th in 10 lap consecutive average. He has 1 top 5, 2 top 10s, and 3 top 20s. And if we remember back to Kansas, Penske really, really struggled at the mile and a half at Kansas. And the mile and a halves have not been their strong suit so far this year. Just kind of keep that in mind. And once again, I think we're lining up very, very similarly to what we saw at Kansas. I think this is a Hendrick and Joe Gibbs style race. Doesn't mean one of the Fords can't come up and potentially have a decent race, but I think for the most part, on averages, this is going to be a Chevy Hendrick and a Toyota Joe Gibbs style race. So, just like next week at Talladega, will be much more of a Penske style race. And then we get to Martinsville and it gets a little wonky, but for the most part, Penske's been really good there too. All right, so Ryan Blaney, 1 top 5, 2 top 10s, 3 top 20s in the last 5 races here. A 17.8 average finish. He finished 35th in this race in the spring race. He has 18 total starts. He has no wins at Las Vegas. And only 6 top 5s out of 18 starts and 10 top 10s out of 18 starts. So not super great. He is +6 to the cut line currently. And if we looked at his practice speeds, I mean, we saw what, on the long run, typically Ryan Blaney's strong point is he is pretty fast. Well, he's not. He's slower than the average, which is, if we have 38 drivers, the average would be 19. He's slower than the other 19 drivers after lap 10, which is a little concerning because that's typically Ryan Blaney's strong point, is he gets faster on long run speeds. They'll make some adjustments. He'll do better than this. But I don't see a top 10 type speed pretty much anywhere in his practice laps. That's a little concerning. And if he's starting in 14th, his average finish is 14th, 17.8 at Vegas, and 10.2 over the trend line over the last 5 5 traditional oval starts. If we put on the calculator, and what does it look like? 14th. If we just get to the average, it's definitely not going to work. And I give kind of at these mile and a halves, at least most of the expensive drivers, I'll give them the token 5 fast laps, even though they may not lead any laps. And that's just kind of saying they might have 5 fast laps. Don't think they have any more if they don't lead any laps, but it's the token 5 fast laps. But that's only 31.25. If you start in 14th and finish in 14th, well, that's definitely not going to work. So how far up without leading any laps would Ryan Blaney need to get? Even finishing in 5th, not leading any laps, only gets him to 50.25. Finish in 3rd, it's still not enough. If you finish in 1st, you'll lead some laps. But if you get to 2nd and don't lead any laps, it's 56.25. It's still not enough, honestly, enough points at 10,500 to get to the optimal range. So, with that being said, Ryan Blaney's going to need to lead some laps for him to really, honestly, be somebody that I would be interested in taking. How many laps would that be? 30? And we'll give him the 2-for-1 special on 15 fast laps. That would do it. That would, finishing in 2nd would get him 68.25. Well, he's got an average finish of 17.8. I'm not sure that plays. I don't think that really happens. I think maybe a 7th. And at that point, I don't think he has a lot of laps led. So honestly, I'm probably going to be a fade off of Ryan Blaney, even though he potentially has maybe a decent chance of having some place differential. I'm really hoping that Kansas can score a touchdown here before they get to the end. Because 24, that'd be 18. I think I have only 14. I don't think it's even be enough. Sorry, checking my bets. 14, 40, 24, 42. It's 18. They're getting plus 14. Yeah, they can't. That won't fly. Oh well. That part of my bet will be dead. Oh well. It's okay. I did a round robin, so it's still mine and I'm playing. Sorry. Back to racing. So honestly, I'm probably going to be a fade off of Ryan Blaney. Because number one, I don't think he leads 30 laps. And if he does, I don't think he. I mean, is it possible? Absolutely. I mean, it's Ryan Blaney. He's a champion. He has won at Charlotte before. Sure, there's a chance that he ends up winning. The odds are not really in his favor, and I'm going to go more with the odds and the averages and say that Ryan Blaney probably is a 7th place type driver, and I think that's being generous. And that's only 58.25. But honestly, I don't think if he gets to that, I don't think he leads any laps, which is 46.25. Sure, it's top 15, but it's not close to optimal, and you've got to nail the optimal at 10,500. So I'm going to fade off of that. Joey Logano, 10,200, starting in 9th. His practice speeds were not much better than Ryan Blaney's. In fact, I think his practice speeds were probably a little bit worse because he was 28th and 24th, single lap and 10 lap consecutive average. So, the only positive spot for Joey Logano is he does have 1 win out of the last 5 races here at Vegas. He's got 4 wins total here at Vegas out of the 24 total starts. So at least he's got wins. And he's got 8 top 5s, 14 top 10s out of his 24 total starts. Well, he's starting in 9th. So all that indicates to be pretty well. Now, his Draftkings average over the last 5 races is only a 23.8. That's not super great. With a 14.6 average finish. So it's. I mean, do we think that Joey Logano is going to go win the race, lead a bunch of laps, and do all those things? I honestly think Joey Logano has potentially a better chance than Ryan Blaney does, but I still think that chance is not superb because of his practice speeds. So if we look at it on the chart, he's only got 2 laps that he hit the average. Other than that, they have all of his laps in practice were worse than average. And that is concerning, especially knowing that as a whole, the Penske group was not particularly fast in practice. They were not particularly fast 2 weeks ago at Kansas. So with all that being said, I don't think Joey Logano is going to, I mean, Ryan Blaney's starting further back than Joey Logano, so I don't think Joey Logano goes and leads a bunch of laps. I don't think he wins or finishes realistically in the top 10. So now, I mean, I'm not a complete fade on Joey. He is a champion, 2-time champion. 3, I don't even know at this point. But even if he goes and finishes in 6th, doesn't lead any laps, has 5 fast laps, it's 43 points. He would need to lead 30 and 15, and even finishing in 6th still doesn't cut it. Finish in 3rd, we'll put him there. Is it possible? Sure. Is it likely? I don't think so. I think probably the best chances for laps led, wins, those types of things, it's William Byron, it's Briscoe, it's Longshot Hamlin, Bell, Larson. I think Elliott probably ends up having a better race than Joey Logano or Brian Blaney after looking at practice speeds and qualifying. William Byron, 10,500, starting in the 5th position. He was 2nd in single lap, 24th in 10 lap consecutive average. He does have 1 win in the last 5 Las Vegas races with 3 top 5s, 5 top 10s, a 60.5 Draftkings average, and a 5.2 average finish. He is right there nipping on the tail of Kyle Larson at this point. Extremely fast. He is the control car for our practice times. He finished this race in 4th. All indications are William Byron should potentially have a pretty decent day. Like I said, he was the control car. The next best driver that I could find with practice speeds that were very similar was Bubba Wallace, who also ran really, really well 2 weeks ago at Kansas. Remember, Bubba Wallace was leading that race, almost about ready to win, when Denny Hamlin got into him and let Chase Elliott end up winning that race. That was Bubba's race to lose. Bubba Wallace came in very quick. But either way, we're talking about William Byron right now, and very, very, very similar in practice speeds. So with that being said, I like the William Byron play. The part of the William Byron play that I don't particularly love is his last 5 trend line on on traditional ovals. It's 11.2. That's not awful. And he's starting in 5th. So he doesn't necessarily need to maybe go win the race. He just needs to get a top 5 finish. At this track, at Vegas, he's got a 5.2 average finish for the last 5. So a lot more indications for William Byron to have a decent day than any of the Penske drivers at this point. So starting in 5th, we think he's the fastest. Let's say he just finishes in 5th. Well, how many laps would William Byron need to lead to potentially do that? Well, 40 and 20 only gets you to 58 points. It's still 2 points outside of that point total. So 50 and 25, finish where you start, gets you to 62.75. I think that's much more likely than a Joey Logano or Ryan Blaney doing the same. Practice speeds were much better. Average finishes here are much better. Trend lines are much better. So I definitely like some William Byron for this race. And I think probably a top 5, if not better than top 5. So William Byron will definitely stay in my core grouping. Chase Briscoe, $9,700, starting in 2nd. His averages are not good here at Las Vegas. In the last 5 races here, he has 1 top 20, no top 10s, a 25th place average finish. He finished 17th in this race in the spring race. 9 total starts with only 1 top 5, 1 top 10, and a 22.1 average finish. He was 7th in single lap, 3rd in 10 lap consecutive average in practice. And kind of like Denny Hamlin, he fired off okay, then he got a little wonky. Nope. That's not even right either. Let me pull this up because I actually want to see this. I'm kind of curious. Vegas practice. We want Briscoe and Byron. No Cody Ware. Go away, Cody. Here, I'll just drag this over here. We can look at it. Make it fit. Yeah, so if we're looking at it, Chase Briscoe's speed was actually really, really good. It's not too far off from Bubba Wallace, to be perfectly honest. So I definitely like the Chase Briscoe play. Also, what did I say? He was starting in second outside pole. I honestly think he might actually get around Denny Hamlin early in the run, and actually may end up leading that first 40-lap stint that we were just talking about. So, but what does that look like? So, and this is where it kind of comes into play. If you decide you want to take a Denny Hamlin in your lineups and think he's going to lead those 40 laps, I'm not necessarily sold that you. It's possible that first and second place starters can end up both in the optimal lineup. I just don't know if I'd love putting both of them together. Does that make sense? I'm going to probably take one or the other, or neither. But I don't think I'll pair them together by any means. But if he's starting in second, and I think he gets around Denny at the beginning, and we're just going off the basic principle of he's going to go lead 40 of the first 80 laps. And he ends up finishing, let's say he just finishes where he starts in second, that's 61 points. That would be enough. The problem is if he falls to fifth, it's 55 points. Now, 9,700, 55 points may or may not play. I still think it's probably you need to get to 60 to be in the optimal. But honestly, I think Chase Briscoe, with his speeds, with what we've seen on his trend line, which is a 5.2. So looking here, that's a 5.2 for the last 5 traditional oval starts. He has an average finish of 5.2. That's where I'm going to lean much more to this number than this number of 25.0, because if we're looking at Chase Briscoe now being with the 19 team, where last year he was with the 14 team and Stuart Haas, I think the trend line is much more of an idea of how well he might finish. So I honestly I don't mind taking some Chase Briscoe. In fact, I think I like Chase Briscoe over a Denny Hamlin. Just for the sheer fact, I think he's probably practice speed wise, and that's not the right practice speed. We just looked at that. The practice speeds look way closer to William Byron's and way better than Denny Hamlin's. So, Chase Elliott, next in line here, our winner at Kansas 2 weeks ago, $9,500, starting in fourth. He was third in single lap, 15th in 10-lap consecutive average. Chase Elliott finally qualified well for once in the playoffs. I don't know if that's good or bad, because he doesn't normally do that. Because it's not normal, that makes me think this is probably not a good spot for him. He's minus 14 to the cut line. That's not good. He's definitely going to need to make up some points. He's definitely going to need to get some stage points. And at Vegas, he has no top 5s, 1 top 10, 2 top 20s, a 21.8 average finish, 16 total starts, no wins, 3 top 5s, 6 top 10s, 19th place average finish. So all those indications are not great. Looking at his practice speeds, they're not as good as William Byron's. He's starting in fourth. William Byron's starting in fifth. I think Willie B gets around Chase Elliott. I think Chase Elliott struggles at the beginning of this race with some handling. I think he falls back into the teens, and he struggles to kind of get anywhere close to the front. I am probably a fade on the Chase Elliott, just because I just know that their fire-off speed has always been a struggle. Only once this year that they've had good fire-off speed, and that was at Dover. And still, I mean, yeah, he went and led 200 laps. He did end up in the optimal lineup, but he did end up winning. If we let's say he finishes in fourth. If he leads 20 laps and has 10 fast laps, it's only 49.5. He needs 60. So I'm probably a fade on the Chase Elliott play. I think he probably ends up finishing in seventh or eighth. And maybe he leads those laps, but it's still only 43.5. I'm probably a fade off of Chase Elliott, at least to the field. I'm probably going to be 10 to 15% ownership range on Chase Elliott. I just don't see it being as good as Kansas for Chase. And we don't have any place differential because he's starting in fourth. Tyler Reddick, $9,200. His practice speeds actually were really good. They were sixth in single lap, second in 10 lap consecutive average. In the last 5 races here at Vegas, he's got 1 top 5, 2 top 10s, 3 top 20s, a 16.8 average finish. He finished 24th in this race last year, and 11 total starts, only 1 top 5, 5 top 10s. So there's practice speeds. They're not bad. They're actually fairly good. They're honestly not as good as Bubba Wallace, who also is with 2311. Sorry, looking at Georgia just scored. What's the score now of the Georgia game? Everybody at Auburn looks stunned. 13-10 with a minute. 19-10. So it's gonna be up by 10. Ugh. I don't think I had that many points for Auburn. Auburn was getting 4. Yep. I'm going to need Auburn to go get a score with 2 minutes left. Losing all of my bets here the last 5 minutes of these football games. But that typically happens in college football. Everything looks good and hunky-dory. Kind of like racing. Everything's hunky-dory until all of a sudden there's a caution and everything goes out the window. As far as Tyler Reddick goes, starting in 8th, I think there's some room potentially here for Tyler Reddick to move up. If Kansas is the indicator, Bubba was better than Tyler Reddick, but Tyler Reddick still had a top 10 car. So with that being said, do I think Tyler Reddick's a top 5? I don't think so. I think it's more of a possibly a best finish where you start, and I don't think you go and lead any laps, and we'll give you the token 5 fast laps. That's 38.25. I am probably going to be a fade on Tyler Reddick. But so he would probably end up being with Tyler Reddick is what I talked about earlier, which is sub-core. He's not going to be in the core 15 drivers that I use as a normal. He will be my sub-core. And honestly, he'll probably end up being about 10% of my ownership stake. Just for the small chance he does end up having a couple good pit stops, things cycle and fall his way. I don't think he goes and races to a top 3 or top 5. And even if he does, I don't think he goes and leads a ton of laps. We can give him the 10 and 5, and that's 46.75. I mean, it's right in the middle of this, which would still put him, honestly, in my sub-core grouping. So I just don't particularly love the Tyler Reddick play. Ross Chastain, starting in 15th, $9,000. This, honestly, Las Vegas is Ross Chastain's best track on the circuit. Why, I don't really know. But if we look at his average finishes over the last 5 races at Vegas, it's a 6.6. I mean, I think the only other 2 that might even be close is William Byron at a 5.2 and Kyle Larson at a 4.8. Bell is a 10.8. Hamlin's 12.4. Blaney 17.8, 14.6 for Joey Logano. I said Byron's at a 5.2. Yeah, Ross Chastain is the third best driver over the last 5 races at Vegas. And it's his absolute best track. And he was actually really, really solid again in practice. He started off really, really slow, but then was able to have better than or faster laps throughout the run. He was 8th in single lap, 8th in 10 lap consecutive average. We just talked about his average finishes are really good. He finished 5th in the spring race here. And if we look at his practice speeds, yes, he fired off slower or right at William Byron, but from lap 10 to lap 19, he was faster than William Byron, and then actually ends up being faster again from 21 to 24. Ross Chastain starting in 15th might be one of the best place differential plays. With that being said, I think there's a good potential that he has got a lot of ownership. So, not saying don't take him, but he's not going to be one of our sneaky picks. I think this is probably a fairly well-known, if you do a little bit of research, you would know that Ross Chastain runs this track very, very well. So starting in 15th, what does that do for the calculator? Because I don't know if he goes and leads a bunch of laps. If he goes and gets to 5th place, and let's say he doesn't lead any laps, but he gets the 5 token fast laps, it's 51.25. It's probably not enough to really make the optimal. If he goes and finishes in 3rd, it's close. He would need to have 10 laps led. And even that still only puts him at 57.75. It's not phenomenal by any means, but at this $9,000, this optimal line gets really kind of, it's closer to between the 55 and 60 point total at $9,000 than it is 60 plus. So I honestly think I like the Ross Chastain play. I think he ends up probably maybe having a few more fast laps in this, but I just have to figure out what the averages are, and it's about a 2-for-1. 2 laps led to 1 fast lap. It just seems to be kind of the average, and that's what I do. I don't try to make it too wonky, but so a 3rd place finish with 10 laps led, 5 fast laps gets you to 57 points, and if he finishes in 5th, it's 54 points. I mean, I still think it's, honestly, if you end up having a Ross Chastain and he doesn't make optimal, I still think you end up cashing well and doing pretty well in a tournament. So I'll continue to move on with Ross Chastain. He'll be in my core 15 drivers. Chris Buescher starting in the 11th position. He was 11th in single lap, 14th in 10 lap consecutive average. He does not have a top 5 at all in either history or the last 5 races here, and only 1 top 10, 3 top 20s. He is starting in the 11th position. 18.4 average finish for Vegas over the last 5 races. Finished 13th here in the spring race. Practice speeds were actually not bad. Yeah, I mean, honestly, they are very respectable. But honestly, they're probably a 7th to 10th place type finish, which is, I mean, not bad for Chris Buescher with a 12.6 average finish here. So if we put on the calculator, we don't think he leads any laps. But starting 11th, if he goes and finishes, let's say he finishes 7th, has the token 5 fast laps, it's 43.25. It's honestly probably not enough to get to the 55 points that he needs. With the potential that he does and gets a top 3, it's 51.25. Still, honestly, not enough without leading some laps or having some fast laps. I don't mind taking a few shots on Chris Buescher. He definitely will not be one of my core drivers. He probably would end up being a sub-core, but not an all-out fade. That he is $8,500. And I think $300 cheaper for a Bubba Wallace is a much better play. $8,200 starting in the 7th position. He was 5th in practice. And In the last 5 races here at Las Vegas, 1 top 5, 1 top 10, 3 top 20s, a 18.4 average finish. None of those are really that good, and neither is his history here. But I'm leaning very much heavily on what he just did at Kansas and what he's done in practice. So it's much more the current trend line than the past trend line. And like I said, when we looked at William Byron's speeds, Bubba Wallace was right there, and he really was honestly almost in line with William Byron for the way practice speeds went. I have no problem taking some shots on Bubba Wallace, especially after him leading a bunch of laps and almost winning the Kansas race a couple weeks ago. So, what does it look like on the calculator, you might ask? If he starts in 7th, let's say he finishes in 4th, and he's able to lead 20 laps. It gets him to a 52.5 at $8,200. That's enough because the optimal line has dropped down now to 50 points or more. So I definitely like the Bubba Wallace play, mostly because of his price tag and how well he practiced and what he did at Kansas a couple weeks ago. It seems like the 2311 crew picked up right where they left off at Kansas. So I will definitely take some of that. Alex Bowman, $8,000, starting in the 12th position. He was 12th in single lap, 16th in 10 lap consecutive average. He finished 7th in this race earlier this year. 2 top 5s, 3 top 10s, 4 top 20s, 13.6 average finish. We look at his. Okay, Alex Bowman right here. Practice speeds were not as good as William Byron's. They went over the average line a couple of times, and he's starting in 12th. I honestly don't think he finishes much better than, what's his average finish here? 13.6. He's starting in 12th. I mean, maybe he gets to 7th, so we'll put him on the calculator for that and kind of see what it looks like. But I don't think he goes and leads a bunch of laps. I don't think he's a dominator by any sense of the imagination. We'll give him the 5 token fast laps. Well, the optimal for him is, I had Bubba at 50. Bubba probably honestly should be closer to 55. Alex Bowman at 55. And if he finishes in 7th, it gets him a 44.25. It's not a complete fade. It's a sub-core for me, to be perfectly honest. But I'm not looking for a whole lot here. He didn't show a whole lot of great speed at Kansas. He was okay. He was average. But starting in 12th, average isn't going to cut it for Draftkings. So I'm going to be a fade off of Alex Bowman. Kyle Busch next in line here at $7,800, starting in 32nd. The question is, will Kyle Busch spin in this race? Honestly, he really hasn't spun. Well, yeah, I guess he did. Well, I don't think he spun at the Roval. He did hit the wall. Got pushed into the wall, I guess, should be more of the real case. But I mean, at this point, I think Kyle Busch is just like, oh my God, can this year be over at this point? And I have to agree with him. It's been a really, really bad year for Kyle Busch. I mean, I'm sure he's looking for any glimmer of hope, and it was not in his practice speeds. They were at best average. Now he's starting in 32nd, so there's definitely room to run here. So if we are starting in 32nd, if we can get to our average, let's say it's 18th, what does that look like? And this is a big what if. It has been just an absolute struggle for Kyle Busch. And honestly, I don't think you get the token 5 fast laps. You get the token 3. It's 40.35, and now the optimal line has dropped because we went from $8,000. We went under $8,000 in price to 50 points. It's still only 40.35. For him to get to that, he's going to need 12th, 13th. 13th place would probably get him close to or at the optimal line, starting in 32nd. I mean, that's better than his average, and you got to think about the trend line. His trend line is 19th place average finish at these tracks. I don't mind taking some shots. Now, Kyle Busch is going to get some ownership because of his starting spot of 32nd. Everybody's going to read into that as, oh, this is a huge place differential. But unless you think he's going to get to a top 10, I don't know if it ends up actually playing super well. I mean, at some point, we got to take some of these mid-tier to cheaper drivers. He's still not a complete value pick at this point because it's $7,500 or less for value. But it's not a bad play. I would put it at the bottom end of my core group or top end of my sub-core group. So, but I also know that he's going to be probably heavily owned, just like our next driver here, Brad Keselowski, starting in 34th. And this is actually one of Brad's better tracks also. He does much better at the 1.5 miles than he does most of the other tracks that we go to. Other than super speedways, he does really good super speedways. $7,600 starting in 34th. He was 29th in single lap, 31st in 10 lap consecutive average. With a 16.2 average finish over the last 5 races here at Vegas, and a total history of 3 wins and a 12.6 average finish. Let's look at his speeds. They are slightly better than average, then worse than average, then slightly better than average. So, I mean, honestly, it's probably looking at about on average, about an 18th place, 19th place in practice. But starting in 34th, that's a whole lot of room to run. Because the guys that are starting worse than 34th are way worse than whatever Brad Keselowski is doing this year. I mean, even Brad Keselowski's trend line is 13th over the last 5 traditional style ovals. So starting in 34th, if he gets to 13th, he's in the optimal range. I mean, heck, he gets to probably 15th, he's probably very close to optimal range still. So a top 15 when he has an average trend line of 13th, I would much rather take Brad Keselowski than a Kyle Busch. Both of them are having pretty bad years, but the trend line for Brad Keselowski is much better. So now, with that being said, because of his starting spot, I expect Brad Keselowski to be at least 25% owned, probably closer to 30 or 35% owned. So you're not going to find a whole lot of sneaky picks by going with a Brad Keselowski. Buyer beware. Ty Gibbs next in line here at $7,400. He is starting in the 10th position. He was fastest in single lap. Now he was in the first group, and he was the first car to hit the track. A green track is extremely fast. Ty Gibbs is notoriously fast for doing that. The other one that does this a lot that is very deceiving is Carson Hocevar. And Ty Gibbs is starting in 10th. Now, this style track is typically fairly good for Ty Gibbs to run well, not to finish well. Because if we look, his average running position at least Vegas is 19.6 and an average finish of 22.6. So it definitely drops off toward the longer, or as the race ages. And in practice, I mean, his practice speeds were good, no doubt. And at some point, Ty Gibbs is going to sneak up and surprise us. The other thing you have to remember is, I'm sure behind closed doors, Grandpa Denny Hamlin and the rest of Joe Gibbs looked at Ty Gibbs and said, dude, your name's on the building. Your name is on this car. You need to understand that we have 3 drivers that are racing for a championship. You don't need to be getting in the way. Even if unless you are going to absolutely go out and win and not be a bother to anyone else, stay out of the way. And that kind of stinks for Ty Gibbs for the rest of this year. But it's also, you have to put that into the thought process of what is Ty Gibbs willing to do? Is he willing to go and wreck maybe one of his teammates that has his name on his car, an ownership stake, just to go get a win and cost them potentially a championship? I don't think so. I think Grandpa got into Ty Gibbs' ear and said, listen here, kid, you got to look at the big picture. So starting in 10th, I think it's safe to say that I don't think he finishes any better than 10th. And his averages definitely don't say that. So, I mean, even if he did have one of the faster cars, I just don't think his averages are not there. So, even if we put him, finishing an eighth, it's 40.25 points. And I think he would be extremely lucky to finish an eighth. So I'm a fade on Ty Gibbs. I'm not even sure he makes my sub core, to be perfectly honest. So if you're looking maybe for a sneaky pick, but I don't know why you would take it, but he would be sneaky because I think he's definitely single digit owned. Austin Cindric at $7,200. Remember, we've talked about this a couple times tonight. Penske has struggled on these mile and a halves recently. And Austin Cindric is no stranger to struggling at Vegas. He has a 19.6 average finish, 2 top 10s, no top 5s, a 19.8 average running position, and finish pretty much. He did finish in 6th in the spring. We look at his practice speeds. I mean, they're not awful. They're not great. They're slightly better at times than average and slightly better than William Byron for a couple laps here, but then they fall off the cliff. And this kind of seems to be what most of the Penske drivers were doing, at least Ryan Blaney and Joe Logano, is by lap like 17 or 18, where they typically become faster, they were falling off even worse. So, with that being said, he's starting in 31st. There is room to move up, especially if he can make it to his 6th place finish that he had in the spring. I just don't honestly know if it's actually in the cards. Because, I mean, once again, if it's do I pass a Joey or a Ryan and take a position away from them? It's still a Penske teammate. You're not going to cost one of your teammates a potential 1 or 2 or 3 points, because you never know when those 1, 2, or 3 points are going to come back to either get into the Final Four or not get into the Final Four. So I'm not saying they have team orders by any means, but trust me, it's in the back of their heads. They know where their teammates are running. I mean, Denny Hamlin, I'm not expecting Denny Hamlin to know where Ross Chastain is in points at all the time, but I honestly would probably think that Austin Cindric is going to know where Ryan Blaney and Joe Logano are in points. And if not, I would almost guarantee that there is a code word that would be said on the radio that would not be like, hey, you need to give up this position to your teammate. But they all have code words for pit stops. In Vegas, it's probably craps, blackjack, let it ride, something in the world of card games and gambling, that they would say to their driver, and that driver knows that, hey, I'm going to go in for fuel only, 2-tire stop, 4-tire stop, or it's another code word for, hey, your teammates need some help, let them by. I'm not saying that is fully going to happen, but Austin Cindric is sitting in the same spot as Ty Gibbs, and Austin Cindric is going to be smart enough, especially running for Penske, to know his role. So, but with that being said, if he goes and finishes in 14th, and that's saying a lot because his average finish at Vegas is 19.6 and his average trend line is 21.6. This is being extremely generous to give him a 14th. It's 48.25. It's not really even in the optimal. It's close though, because it's 7,200, where the optimal line is about ready to fall to 45 points. So it's right on the cusp. I will have some ownership in Austin Cindric because I think in 14th, at that point, if you're Ryan Blaney or Joey Logano, you'll be like, my day's screwed anyways. I'm finishing 15th. I don't need the one spot from you, Austin. Just take it. So I mean, I'm fine with taking Austin Cindric. He doesn't need to finish in top 10, and he finished 6th in the spring race here. I don't think he's much better than a 10th place finish. I think a 14th is actually going to be a lot to ask. So I'll have some ownerships with Austin. I just probably won't have a ton. He'll be kind of one of the ones I kind of spread around a little bit. Our winner from the spring, which still makes absolutely no sense whatsoever where that came from or why it came from there, because Josh Berry at the mile and a half since then have not been great. I mean, even with his win, he still has an 18.5 average finish. That's with a win out of 4 starts. If you take that out, he's only got one top 20 out of 3 other starts. It's not great here. It's just not how they pulled that off. He was 34th and 20th in practice. But look at his practice speeds. There's not one that's better than average. Yes, he's starting worse than average. But these are Cody Ware style practice laps. They're awful. They're off the chart awful. I don't even. I mean, maybe he gets to his average finish of 24th. I mean, his average line is really, really shot all the heck in a handbasket because the first 3 races of the playoffs and he finished dead last in all of them. So that hurt his averages, and I get that. But even if he gets to 18.5, we'll put it on the chart calculator and see. 29th to 18th. Gives him 38.25 points, 50-point optimal line, maybe even 45. It still doesn't get him close. So I'm probably a fade on Josh Berry. I mean, the only way I would possibly take him is if he was starting 34th or 35th. And I think 29th I don't think he gets there. Carson Osevar, $7,000, starting in the 22nd spot. He was 13th in single lap, 7th in 10-lap consecutive average. Carson, Chaos, Hosevar, right there with, I don't even know what to think about this kid anymore, because the days that you think he's going to do great, he does awful. The days that you think he's going to do awful, he does pretty good. And he's got a 26th place average finish out of 4 starts here, 1 top 20. He was 13th and 7th in practice, but those were, he was like, I had a fast lap, I had a slow lap, I had a fast lap, I had a slow lap, I had a slow lap. He's just all over the place. And he's super aggressive. Starting in 22nd, I honestly don't know what to do with the Carson Hosevar. Buyer beware. Just if you decide to take him, I don't know if he goes and leads any laps. We'll just give him the token 5 fast laps. If he happens to go finish 8th, he makes the optimal lineup. If anything better than 8th, he makes the optimal lineup. Anything worse than that, he doesn't make the optimal lineup. I will have 2 to 3 lineups with him in it. Honestly, I probably shouldn't even do that. But I'll put up a lineup together with him and Austin Cindric in it, and just be like, okay, well, if something really wonky happens, then I'll end up doing well. But I don't think it will. Ryan Preece. Happy new fatherhood day to Ryan Preece. He just had another baby. Congratulations to him and his wife. I think he had a baby boy this time. I think they had a baby girl before. I think the girl's like 4 or 5 years old, but I saw some pictures. Very cute. Congratulations to Ryan Preece. I don't even know his family's pregnant, but he's not a big guy that talks about, I guess, his personal life, because I honestly didn't know he had one kid, much less be married. So, but either way, congratulations to Ryan Preece on the birth of their new baby. It didn't seem to affect his racing. He's starting in 16th. He was 30th and 22nd in practice. He has a 19.4 average finish here at Kansas with 1 top 5, 1 top 10, 1 top 20. A 22.5 total average finish. He did finish in 3rd here in the spring. The Force just had something special for this spring race, I guess, because he and Josh Berry both finished top 3. His practice speeds were, honestly, about where he's starting in 16th, probably a little bit worse than that. So honestly, I think he probably finishes in the teens, which honestly is not going to be enough. Start in 16th. Let's say you get to 12th. Does that even come into play? 37.25. And honestly, yeah, he's probably 45 points or more. He's at 37.25. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of interest in Ryan Preece. I think he's starting too far up, in my opinion. Daniel Suarez, $6,700, starting in 17th. He was 18th in single lap, 36 total laps of practice, 25th in 10 lap consecutive average. But he's got an 8.2 average finish here. For some reason, Trackhouse does extremely well at Vegas. Because remember, I mean, Daniel Suarez probably has the fourth best average finish at Las Vegas. Remember who the third one is? Ross Chastain. Both of them run for Trackhouse. The other two were Hendrick cars. So, the Chevys run really, really well here on average. He's starting in 17th. Practice speeds were not great. They were a little bit worse than average. He's starting just a little bit better than average. Can he get to his average finish of 8.2? I don't know. Maybe. Let's see. Starting in 17th. What does that look like on the calculator? Let's say he gets to his average of... That's not right. 8.2. 8.2. Yeah. As best is second, as worst is 15. That's 8.2. So get to 8th place. We'll give you the token 5 fast laps. It's 47.25. Yeah, if he can go get his average finish, that puts him in the optimal. So, and I think that probably he ends up being overlooked a lot, to be honest. So, I'll have some ownership in Daniel Suarez. I think there is something behind this whole Trackhouse thing. Now, the question would be, here in a few minutes, we'll get to Shane Van Gisbergen, who's the other Trackhouse car. Yeah, sorry, looking at football real quick. Arizona State is down to Utah by 18. Guess there was something to it. Yeah, because Arizona State's 21st and Utah is not ranked. They are playing in Utah. So, all right, back to racing. AJ Allmendinger, $6,600. Quietly's actually had a pretty decent year this year. I do have to say AJ's had a decent year. He didn't make the playoffs, didn't win a race, but I think quietly being in his mid-40s, he's actually been doing pretty well, especially for Kaulig Racing. I mean, they have not been a great organization this year in any Xfinity or Cup. But $6,600 starting in 20th. He was 16th in single lap, 18th in 10 lap consecutive average. 15.7 average finish here with one top 10, two top 20s for 4 starts. 19.7 for his total history here. Not all bad. He's about average in practice speeds. Sometimes a little bit better than average. Starting just slightly worse than average. And he's got an average finish of 15.7 starting in 20th. I mean, it's probably not enough to make the optimal. It's probably enough to make... Let's see. If he goes and gets 15th, 34.35. It's just barely in the top 15. Andrew says, just not have been many cautions in the spring. Think that happens, or do they get aggressive for the playoffs? Great question. Let's go back and look real quick at the different. So the fall, which would be the playoff race at Vegas last year, I don't think there were. I wonder. I don't even know. Does Racing Reference show cautions per race? So if we look at 2025 Vegas, yes, they had 9 cautions for 53 laps. 2 of those cautions were for stage breaks, so 7 cautions in the spring. previous races at the track, which would be the fall race of last year, which would be the playoff race, there were only 5 cautions. So 2 for stage breaks, 3 others with 13 lead changes. See what the spring race of last year brought: 6 cautions. So 4 for incident, 2 for stage breaks. Then the playoff race in 2023, there were 7 cautions, so 5 cautions for incident. Yeah, I mean, actually, for what this is showing, there were more cautions in the spring race than we've had at the previous 5 or 6 races. There were 8 in 2022. And 9 in the spring. So the spring, actually, this past spring race had the most amount of cautions that we've seen in the next gen era. So there must turns into a fuel race. Some of those ugly plays could hit. Yeah. I think because of the tire wear situation, I forgot to look. We can look here on JSki. You can look at the Goodyear notes. And the Goodyear Racing. So let's see. The Goodyear Racing Eagle tire setup awaiting NASCAR Cup Series Xfinity is the same left and right side tires that they had at Kansas 2 weeks ago. Because we had really good tire fall off at Kansas, and I saw pretty decent tire wear fall off for practice. The question is, was this the same tire that they used in the spring? This weekend marks only the second time that both series ran the right side tires, which means teams can lean on their Kansas data to refine their strategies ahead of Las Vegas. The left side tires across the Cup Series have been used 5 times previous this season. The teams come to Vegas with a solid baseline to work from. But this only marks the second time both series will run these right-side tires. The right-side tires actually wear more than the left-side tires, and they're softer. And it's only the second time, which would mean that they ran the same tire at Kansas. Yeah, so I don't think we end up with a fuel mileage race, Andrew. My best bet. Mostly because I think it's playoffs. Even though we had one last year. So I get that. I don't think it happens. It could. I think it's much more of a tire wear race than a fuel mileage race. I think it'll be much more strategizing on tires like we saw at Kansas than what we saw last year in this race. So I think tires will mean much more. So I think if there's a caution, everybody's going to come and get tires. I think they learned their lessons from Chase Elliott winning the race 2 weeks ago at Kansas with the same tire setup. Track's slightly different, I understand it, but it's still a mile and a half. In fact, Vegas is faster. So tires, in all honesty, would mean more, even though there's not as significant speed-wise fall off. When you're trying to drive 180 miles an hour in the corner, you want it to stick. So yeah, I think it's much more of a tire strategy wear type situation than it is a fuel mileage situation. So, which could still come into play with somebody like a Shane Van Gisbergen, who ran 2 weeks ago at Kansas, ran really, really well. The problem is Shane's starting in 13th. And I'm trying to remember where Shane started at Kansas. I think it was like 25th or 26th. I don't think he started that far up. Let's see. Kansas SVG started in 24th. So that helped him. This is starting in 13th. Big time difference. Yeah. He started in 24th and he finished in 10th. And that's why I gave him 48 points at Kansas. This week, though, he's starting in 13th. If he finishes in 10th, it's 37. He's outside the optimal. So, yeah. I think Shane is vastly improving very quickly on the ovals. Do I think he goes and finishes? I mean, even if he finishes in 10th, it's 37 points. Sure, it's top 15, but it's not top. It's not in the optimal. I think this is asking a lot for him to do it 2 mile-and-a-halfs in a row. It's possible, but unlikely. All right. So that's SVG. And his practice speeds were not as good as they were 2 weeks ago at Kansas. They weren't. This is much worse than what it was. And then he goes out and qualifies 13th. So it is Trackhouse. Trackhouse does race well at Vegas. And I understand all that. I just think he outkicked his coverage. I think he could possibly finish in the teens. The problem is that's not going to be enough for us to worry about, though. I mean, even if he goes and finishes in 6th without leading a lap or having fast laps, he's right at would be the hypothetical optimal lineup line. So, and I just don't see anywhere where Shane finishes in 6th without just some wild craziness happening. Which, I mean, sure, it's NASCAR. Anything's possible, but very unlikely. Eric Jones, $6,300 next in line here, starting in the 19th spot. Has an average finish of 22.6. He was 25th in practice. For 16 total starts, he's never finished in the top 5. 4 top 10s, a 20.7 average finish. Let's look at his practice speeds on the chart. At or just better than average for most of practice, and he's starting right at average at 19th. So, in all honesty, it's probably like a 15th place finish, possibly. I mean, it could be better than that, but just going off of speeds, averages, and everything else, I'm just going to call it a 15th. It's 34.25. Not quite enough, and that's if he has 5 fast laps, and that's actually being generous. How far up would he need to go to get to 45 points? Can he finish 10th? Yep. 10th place finish would put him in the potential optimal lineup spot, starting in 19th. Don't love it. I would much rather take his teammate, John Hunter Nemechek, who actually has a better average finish than Eric Jones. And his practice speeds looked pretty much about the same. He was 20th in single lap, 17th in 10 lap consecutive average, and he's starting at 26th. It's 7 spots of place differential better for $300 or $100 in savings. And like I said, his practice speeds were actually better than Eric's, at least for the first 18 laps. So I think actually John Hunter ends up having a fairly good race, especially starting from 26th. It's not going to take a whole lot for him to get up there, finish in, 13th? Gets him real close to that 45-point optimal lineup. So I definitely like the John Hunter Nemechek play. He'll probably get a little more ownership than Eric because it's $100 in savings and 7 spots of place differential. But, I mean, I don't mind either one. I just probably would prefer the John Hunter. It gives us the extra 7 spots of place differential. Michael McDowell. $6,100 starting in 18th. He's got a 20.6 average finish. He was 19th in a single lap of practice, 32nd in 10 lap consecutive average. And out of his 23 total starts, he's never finished inside the top 10. But he does 6 top 20s, a 28.0 average finish. And we look at his practice speeds, they're just not good. So starting in 18th, yeah. I don't even need to put on the calculator because I don't think he finishes better than 18th. I think it's a long shot for him to finish 18th. Even if he finishes 17th, we'll give him one spot better. 28.35 points. Nope, not interested. Noah Gragson from Las Vegas, along with the only two drivers. Well, there's three drivers in the race. There's Kyle Busch, Noah Gragson, and Riley Herbst are the three drivers from Las Vegas. $5,900 for Noah. He was starting in 28th. His practice speeds are 24th and 21st. He has a 21st place average finish. But out of his 5 total starts at Vegas, which actually would be no, he did miss that one race where he said a naughty word online. 19.2 average finish. Yeah, stupid cancel culture. Such bullshit. Oops. I said a naughty word. Hopefully I said it really quiet. Yeah, but I mean, Noah is at or better than average for most of his practice. He had 1, 2, 3 laps out of 30. So 10% of the time he was slower than average, but most of the time he was at or better than even William Byron. And he's starting in 28th. I honestly think this is a great potential and opportunity maybe for Noah Gragson to get close to a top 10. I'm not calling quite for a top 10, but it'd be close. We'll give him a 12th place finish. 49.25. All he's got to do, because he's now under $6,000 in salary cap, 40 points. Probably gets him close to the optimal lineup, if not in, especially if he gets to 49.25. I really, really like the Noah Gragson play this week. So I will have a decent amount of ownership in the Noah Gragson play. Zane Smith, starting 23rd. He was 22nd in single lap, 10th or 11th in 10 lap consecutive average. He has a 25th place average finish over 3 starts here at Las Vegas. And his practice speeds were, I mean, honestly, not bad. Not bad at all. Not quite as good as Noah's. And he's starting 5 spots worse than Noah Gragson. But if we put on the calculator, how far does he need to get? 14th place or better for Zane Smith, which I think is possible. I mean, he was running really, really well at Kansas till he rolled over 3 times. I mean, if we're looking back at Kansas as a possible a race to look at, Zane was running extremely well. Now, Kansas, like it is slightly different, but I don't mind. I think there's a potential for a top 15 here for Zane. So, I mean, honestly, I don't mind. I don't think I mind any of the front row guys. In fact, you could probably run all 3 front row guys and probably come close to running all 3 Gibbs or all 3 Hendrick that are in the playoffs. Because Todd Gilliland's starting in 30th, and his averages are worst of all 3. He's got a 28.4 average finish. Oh, yeah, and his practice speeds are not good. He's way out. So I like the Zane and the Noah. I do not like the Todd Gilliland from the front row guys. That's really bad. I don't even have to put on a calculator starting in 30th. I don't think he even gets to 20th. And even with 10 spots of place differential, I don't think it's going to be enough. Yeah, it's 33 points. It barely puts him in the top 15. So, yeah, I'm probably a fade on Todd. Now, starting in 30th, out of the craziness that he ends up getting, to 15th, I'll have, maybe 10% ownership. Maybe. Because that's 43 points. Austin Dillon starting in 25th. He was 36th in single lap, 37th in 10 lap consecutive average. So worse and worse. He's got a 26th place average finish over the last 5 races here. And when we look at his practice speeds, I don't know what car they had set up. Maybe it was their Phoenix setup or their Richmond setup here, because he was way not even close. And then he goes out and qualifies 25th. when his average finish is pretty much 24th. I don't even have to put it on the calculator. It's not worth even looking at. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. starting in 24th. He was 14th in single lap, 12th in 10 lap consecutive average, 22.2 average finish over the last 5 races with 2 times in the top 20, no times in the top 10. Practice speeds were, I mean, they're not bad. They're better than average. He's starting slightly worse than average, but I think maybe it's at best 17th and 24th to 17th. I don't think ends up playing. 35.25. It's barely in the top 15. It's not going to make the optimal. I think Ricky Stenhouse is actually starting a little too far up. I think there's a potential maybe for a top 20, but I don't think it's any better than 15th. So I will probably be a fade off of Ricky. I still like the Noah and the Zane play for cheapos. Justin Haley, $5,300. His practice speeds were 15th and 10th. He has an average finish of 17.6 over the last 5 races at Vegas. Okay, potential. His first 17 laps look okay. Then it kind of looks like Denny Hamlin. It falls off the cliff. But he's starting at 27th, so that's a lot better than the first place that Denny Hamlin is starting in. So what does it look like on the calculator? Get to, let's see, 27th. And we get to 17th gets him to 36. That's not going to be enough. So he would need to get to 15th. Yeah, 15th place finish would probably put him there. 17.6, 20th. I mean, that's a tough one to climb, but it's possible. I'm probably like a 10% ownership on Justin Haley, maybe sub-core. Because I'm not sure I'd go with the Cole Custer starting in 21st. I think he's starting too far up, to be perfectly honest. He has average finish over 3 races of 26th, 8 races total of 24th, and his practice speeds were nowhere close to average. So, and he's pretty much qualified right at the average line. And we don't really have to put a calculator because I don't think he finishes any better than 21st, and that gives us no place differential benefit. So, I'm not interested in that. Ty Dillon, starting in 35th. His practice speeds were not good, 32nd and 34th, but I'm not surprised by that. He has an average finish of 26th. Is there, I mean, at this point, we are getting close to the bottom of the barrel, and I have no interest in taking Catherine Legg and is it JJ, the other driver that's racing? I completely forgot at this point who would. Yeah, it's JJ and Catherine Legg. They were awful in practice. I didn't even put them on this chart. But Ty Dillon starting in 35th. Practice speeds were. He's not even close to the average line. It gets to 27th. I don't think it even comes close to even playing. But we'll put it on there just to see. We'll give him 25th. It's 29.25. It's not even in the top 15. So, yeah, not interested. All right, here's the interesting one, because here's the third installment of I live in Las Vegas, or I grew up in Las Vegas. Will I be fast at my track? One of the few wins that Riley Herbst has in the Xfinity Series is a win here at Vegas. It was 2 years ago, and he was dominant in that race. Now, one race does not make us an excellent racer at these tracks. But a $4,900 Riley Herbst was 26th and 23rd in practice. And I'm not saying that that's great by any means, but he's $4,900 starting in 33rd. He has an average finish of 19th. The sample size is really small. It's 1. When we look at his practice speeds, they're not bad. They stay at or below the average line. And if the average line is 18th or 19th place, he's better than 18th or 19th all throughout practice. Starting in 33rd, go get 19th, Riley. What does that give us? That's probably going to be really flipping close. It's 38.9 if he has 2 fast laps. That's 1 to 2 spots away. at $4,900. And at that point, you definitely could fit in a lot of expensive guys. And now, trust me, Riley has burned me probably 10 times this year in lineups. So I absolutely get it. It is an absolute long shot to even think about doing a Riley Herbst. I will hold my nose and put Riley Herbst in some of my lineups. It's not going to be heavy by any means. It probably maybe 10% owned. And it'll only be where it's absolutely necessary because I'm not going down to Cody Ware. Because he's starting 36, he was 35th and 36, has an average finish of 30th. And if we look at his practices, so you have 36th place starting Cody Ware compared to a 33rd place Riley Herbst with those practice speeds. Night and day difference. I'll take the Riley Herbst. And like I said, I'll hold my nose into it, but I'll take it. I don't even put Cody Ware on the sheets. All right, we are at the 2-hour mark. Let's run them down real quick. Let's look at who I like and who I don't like. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. We have 3 weeks left. 2 weeks of me sitting in this chair. 1 week that gets really wonky when I go to Martinsville. I will do a Friday morning or Thursday, probably Friday morning live. So it'll be no qualifying, no practice, no anything. It'll be who runs well at Martinsville and who doesn't. And then I'll do a follow-up Sunday morning before we go to the race on who I like and who I don't like. Both of them are about a 30 to 40-minute segment show. And it's real quick. It's real in and out because I go to the truck race, I go to the Xfinity race, I go to the Cup race at Martinsville. It's my favorite track. My best friend lives down there. And you're lucky to even get a video from me. But I'll still put it out there because that's what I do. Yes, potential dominators. Yes, absolutely love Kyle Larson, William Byron, Christopher Bell. Ross Chastain's probably one of the best guys to start in the top 20 to finish maybe top 5, maybe even get a win. Place differentials, definitely Brad Keselowski. Kyle Busch is a kind of hold your nose and take it. Kind of like Riley Herbst. I actually probably like Riley Herbst to finish better than Kyle Busch, but whatever. Austin Cindric. Josh Berry, I don't think I really like. Daniel Suarez, he's almost starting too far up, but I understand the Trackhouse narrative. They run really well here. I really like the John Hunter play. I don't know if I really love the Denny Hamlin play because I think Briscoe gets around him early. Now, Briscoe only comes in 21st on my ranking sheet, but it's also taking into account 10 races at like-minded or like similar tracks. Half of those are still with when he was with Stuart Haas, and they weren't that good. So I think Briscoe ends up actually doing pretty well. I like the Bubba Wallace. I'm not sure I love the Chase Elliott. I think he overqualified. I mean, good for him. I think he ends up getting some points at stage breaks, but I don't know if I like it for Draftkings. Butcher, I think, overqualified. Alex Bowman, I think, overqualified. Tyler Reddick, maybe. Joe Logano, don't love the Penske's this weekend. Carson Hayas Hocevar, flip a coin. I don't know what he does because I don't think he knows what he does. Ty Dillon's practice speeds were awful. Eric Jones overqualified. Ryan Preece, you can always run the narrative of he's a new dad, may end up running decent. Joe Gregson, I really do like that play. I definitely like the Riley Herbst play. I like the Zane Smith, Noah Gregson. So yeah, those are some of the common plays I like and don't like. Hopefully you end up having a good, solid weekend and win some money. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Next week is Talladega. We will be live Saturday night at 9 o'clock. There is no late race because they don't have lights at Talladega. So Saturday night, next weekend at 9 o'clock. And then the following week will be a wonky Martinsville start. But good luck this weekend in Las Vegas. Roll those dice. And wish you the best of luck. We got some interesting plays that are out there. And it always typically ends up being a pretty good race here. So I can't wait for tomorrow. You guys have a great rest of your weekend. Good luck. Let me know if you end up hitting for some money. Thanks for tuning in.
Gentlemen, start your engines. 40 cars coming to life.
He's still taking the field? Yep. Love it. Get a good deep breath. Get ready to roll here. Only about one thing tonight, getting the W, so gotta be around the end to do that. Get ready to roll tonight, boys. Go have some fun.
Don't get me any more fired up than I already am.
All the way to the checkered. You're fine. Nobody's got to run. Checker pass, baby! Really proud of you, man. Drove your butt off tonight. We had the best car here, bud. Yeah, boys. Way to rebound. Great job. Great job, bud. Really good job. Appreciate you hanging in there with us all weekend. What a weekend. Good job. Thank you.